Welcome back, everybody, to the Sunship Sports Channel, and welcome back to Blue and Gold Till I'm Dead and Cold. It's been a minute, hasn't it? The past week or so, you haven't seen a lot of content from me. Had some stuff going on, but we are back up and running now. This is going to be the only episode or video you're going to get this week with Notre Dame on a bye. But man, has a lot happened since the last time we talked. So what has all happened? Well, it starts with that debacle in the Louisville game where 5 seconds after that game ended, everybody was calling for Marcus Freeman and Gerard Parker's job. I wasn't one of them. However, I'm still not thrilled with the offensive play calling. It looks like the defense woke up this past game when we curb stomped USC 48-20. That's right. The Heisman Trophy winner came into South Bend, and Xavier Watts, holy cow, 4 of the 5 turnovers were directly because of him. You had the interceptions, you had a scoop and score. I mean, the forced fumble, all of it, just an incredible defensive display by that young man and, quite frankly, the entire defense. Folks, that game was won in the trenches. We'll get into a little bit of the details here a little later, but the offensive and the defensive lines looked polar opposite than what they looked in the Louisville game. Now, Louisville, I think, probably had a better defensive line than what USC put out there. I was shocked by how bad USC's defensive line was. And not only that, I was shocked by how bad their offensive line was. And if you look at Lincoln Riley, he's never been someone to concentrate on the trenches. Lincoln Riley is a lot of flash. He's all about the skill position players. And don't get me wrong, he's outstanding at doing it. But he runs teams in such a way that you don't have to have 3 NFL guys on your offensive and defensive lines to win a bunch of football games. Unless you do need that. Because when he walked into South Bend, and look, you saw this with Oklahoma too. When he was the head coach of Oklahoma, Oklahoma would put up some ridiculous numbers against what you'd call subpar teams, and then they'd come up against a team that had a really strong front 4 on defense or a really dominant front 5 on offense, and it would give those Oklahoma Sooner teams of Lincoln Riley trouble. I don't know what happened to the Heisman Trophy winner. He did not look like the Heisman Trophy winner from last year. Caleb Williams, for all intents and purposes, people have already penciled him in as the number 1 draft pick in next year's draft. This past game, he had 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions, 199 yards with a QBR of 55.7. That's not Heisman numbers. Now, Notre Dame has a very good defense, but for whatever reason, and I get it, it's on the road, and you've heard me say multiple times, look, guys, winning on the road in college football in big-time environments is tough. It is. It's tough. These are kids out there. They get psyched out by, the 100,000 screaming fans, and you can get that in your head, or they can get that in their head, and it just takes them out of their game. Caleb Williams made some bad decisions, and to his credit, he was the first one to say that he needed to play better. He did not play the way he needed to. I also don't think Lincoln Riley had this team ready. I think because of how Notre Dame played the week before against Louisville, and to tell you the truth, I'm more not over the Louisville loss than I am content with the USC victory. Louisville dominated us in every way that we dominated USC, which is then strange because this past weekend, Louisville went out and got punched in the teeth by a 1-4 Pitt team. So, and we play that Pitt team coming up in South Bend. So that'll be interesting to see if that was Louisville just getting up for the biggest game in the history of their university. I don't know if it was the biggest game in the history of their university, but it was the game that they sold more tickets for than any other game. That was a raucous crowd. My brother was actually at the game, and he said, man, there were some times that I didn't know if I was going to get out of there or not. I mean, those Louisville fans were rowdy. And like I mentioned about Caleb Williams and USC, it psyched Notre Dame out. So where do the Irish stand? The Irish are now the 15th ranked team in the nation, 3 spots above USC. Folks, the national title's not an option. So I still hear people say, well, with 2 losses. No, guys, realistically, maybe next year when there's 12 teams in the playoffs, we're at 15 right now, and then you win out and win your last 4 games and get up to 8th or 9th or something like that. Absolutely. This year, no. This year, there's too many teams that are either undefeated or are 1 loss or are going to end up with 1 loss that play in some really good conferences that it's going to be difficult to get Notre Dame up there. Now, do I think we can crack the top 10? Absolutely. But I don't think we're going to sniff anywhere close to 5. And then obviously definitely not 4. So what do we have left to look at here? Notre Dame is now on a bye, which let's talk about that for a second. Wouldn't that bye have been nice to get right before the Louisville game? I don't know why we went 8 straight games without a bye, and that Louisville game was scheduled the week of finals. And now I know that these schedules are done years in advance and stuff like that, but can somebody please take a look at the calendar maybe a year or 2 in advance and say, okay, what week is going to be finals week? Because let's face it, folks, this is Notre Dame. This isn't Florida State or Alabama or one of these other schools. And I don't mean to disparage schools' academic standards, but when you're talking about teams like Notre Dame and Stanford and even University of Michigan, Northwestern, these schools, Vanderbilt, they have these much higher academic standards. And when it's their midterm week, being on the road is definitely not a plus. Now, nobody knew at the time that this schedule was put together that this was going to be a 4-game stretch, all ranked teams. I don't even know if Lincoln Riley was at USC yet when this particular schedule came out. Obviously, we thought Ohio State was going to be good. Duke has been perennially bad in football up until just recently, so I don't think when that game was scheduled that we thought that was going to be a tough one. And Louisville's been up and down. So, but it ended up being 4 top 25 teams, and we went 2-2. So I'm not satisfied with that. But look, folks, this is still a young team with a young coaching staff, but they are doing better than they were doing last year. Last year at this time, I believe they already had 3 losses, and then they got right against Clemson when Clemson came into South Bend and they blew them out. However, it's not all good news, because even in this game against USC where we won, when you look at the statistics of the game, the 48-20, the score is obviously the most important statistic. But you know what time of possession in this game was? About 35 minutes to 25 minutes in favor of USC. Notre Dame still could not move the ball great against USC. We won 48-20. You know what the yardage was? 302 total yards by USC, 251 by Notre Dame. USC passed for 199 yards. Notre Dame passed for 126 yards. We had 6.3 yards per play, which was higher than USC's, but USC had the 3 interceptions. So that's what basically did them in. It wasn't the offensive juggernaut of Notre Dame, because we weren't an offensive juggernaut. Now, we did rush well again. Our offensive line remembered how to run block, and Audric Estime remembered how to put his head and shoulders down and just plow through people. Notre Dame averaged 4.3 yards a carry and gained 125 yards to USC's 103. USC also had about 20 yards more in turnovers 20 yards more in penalties than Notre Dame did. So was this Notre Dame enforcing their will, or was this an excellent game plan by Marcus Freeman and Al Golden to try to confuse this USC offense into committing those turnovers? Most of Notre Dame's drives started at the 50-yard line or better because of all these turnovers. And when you only have half a field to go, that definitely makes a difference. So remember, when you're looking at this score, even though it was 48-20, yeah, there were some big plays. The beautiful bomb to Chris Tyree was a great play. Don't get me wrong, there were some really nice offensive parts of this game for Notre Dame, but I always say keep it in perspective. Keep it in perspective. Notre Dame's defense came to play. Remember, Al Golden was just coaching in the Super Bowl 2 years ago, the linebackers for the Cincinnati Bengals. He's a very good defensive coach. Marcus Freeman, our head coach, is a defensive coach. Mickens, cornerback coach. I mean, we have got a lot of talent on the defensive side of the ball and the defensive coaching staff. Doesn't always mean we make the right decisions, though. 10 men on the field. We need to get better about that. And let's try to remember, Marcus Freeman is in his second year as a head coach. This is the first time he's been head coach anywhere. Remember, Brian Kelly had to make his bones at Central Michigan and Cincinnati before he got a shot at the Golden Dome. Marcus Freeman, and let's face it, if it wasn't for the pressure put on by the student body and the players themselves, Notre Dame would have gone out and tried to find somebody else. Now, I like Marcus Freeman. Marcus Freeman is an incredible person, and he is an outstanding recruiter. We're going to talk a little bit about that, because when people talk about, hey, well, we need to get rid of him, we need to get rid of him, we need to get rid of him, slow your roll for a second. Let Marcus Freeman get all his guys in the building. You're seeing a lot of freshmen play this year. And that's different in years past, because the freshmen that we have on this team were all recruited by Marcus Freeman and his staff, and they're poking their heads on the field a lot quicker than, let's just say, the Brian Kelly classes, where it didn't look like they were getting on the field as quick. Matter of fact, our highest rated recruit, Charles Jagasa, hasn't seen much action. I would have liked to seen them give him a try at guard, because our interior offensive line play has not been stellar. But I understand wanting to preserve his red shirt, especially in a season where you're not going to have a chance at the national title. So you can preserve that red shirt. I would like to see them get him into at least 2, 3, 4 games before the end of the season, possibly including the bowl game. Jeremiah Love. I love Audric Estime, but Jeremiah Love is absolutely electric. His burst through the hole is ungodly. He's what they call instant offense. A lot of the NFL guys that are coming to the game, the scouts that are looking at Notre Dame's players, they're looking at Jeremiah Love on the offensive side of the ball. Yeah, they might be looking at Sam Hartman, but they are definitely looking at Jeremiah Love, because he is one of, if not the best pure athlete on the team. Braylon James has not seen the field yet, but he's another stellar recruit that I think we're going to see a lot of coming up. Just this past game, Boubacar Traore. I loved Boubacar Traore when they were recruiting him. He got his first sack. I think it's his only game action too that he's had this year in the game against USC. I think they're going to preserve his red shirt as well. But the fact that we're getting them in there, Cooper Flanagan at tight end, haven't seen a whole lot of him. Armel Mukum, Christian Gray, we have seen quite a bit of him. Drake Bowen, he's been on the field. Ben Minnick, Micah Bell, Devin Houston at defensive tackle, Jaden Osbury at linebacker, Jaden Greathouse, wide receiver, Rico Flores, wide receiver. Brennan Vernon's been on the field. Preston Zintner. I mean, the amount of freshmen that have already seen the field this year, and guys like Greathouse and Flores are always on the field. Now, granted, Greathouse has had some injuries, but the first couple of games he may have been our number one receiver. Jaden Thomas, I know he's still nursing injuries. Those hamstring injuries are so difficult to tell when somebody's 100% and when they're not. Greathouse obviously now is nursing the same thing. And then Jordan Faison was recruited to be a lacrosse player, but his athletic ability just can't be denied. Jordan Faison has had some really nice plays. He had the touchdown against Louisville. He had a nice third down conversion. Getting these guys on the field now and getting them some field time is outstanding, because that's only going to help Notre Dame over the next 2-3 years as Marcus Freeman builds this university's program into something that Notre Dame fans believe that it can be, and want to return to prominence and dominance, to where Notre Dame is perennially a top 10 or even a top 5 type of team. And we're getting the athletes to do that. So make no mistake, this is not the only year where you're going to see that. Let's talk a little bit about the quarterback position, because I know a lot of people are worried that, Sam Hartman's leaving, after this year, and he's going to go to the NFL. What's our quarterback room going to look like? Good, bordering on great. Steve Angeli, I think, is ready to take that next step, but he may have some competition. Kenny Minchie, who is a high 4-star. Then next year, you have C.J. Carr, which is one of Notre Dame's biggest recruits at the quarterback position in years. He's coming in, grandson of Lloyd Carr, longtime football coach at the University of Michigan. And then the year after that, Notre Dame's already landed Deuce Knight. That kid's got some size to him and some athletic ability, another high 4-star. So a position that Notre Dame, it seems for years, couldn't find anyone, you're starting to get a logjam of upper tier players. CJ Carr is rated as the 5th best quarterback coming into the 2024 season. Now, I've seen him as high as second in some. The one that I usually look at the most is 24/7 Sports, but I know that there are tons of recruiting websites that you can get this, but I've seen him as high as second, and I've seen him as low as 5th. Then you go into the 2025 class as far as quarterbacks go, and you have Deuce Knight as the 10th highest quarterback. Now, think of how many high schools there are in the United States. He's the 10th best quarterback. It'd be impressive if he was the 10th best quarterback in his own state. He's the 10th best quarterback in the nation. CJ Carr, 5th best quarterback in the nation. I mean, these are some impressive athletes that Notre Dame is getting at the quarterback position. Wide receiver, we've seen what we've already seen. Greathouse and Flores this year. Braylon James, possibly see him later in the year in a few games. Definitely we'll see him next year. You have Cam Williams coming in next year out of Illinois. Cam Williams, probably our highest receiver recruit in many years. CJ Carr and Cam Williams are already striking up a great camaraderie, and they are two of the best recruiters as far as incoming players for Notre Dame. So the fact that we have those guys, we got Micah Gilbert coming in at wide receiver as well, kid out of Ohio. We definitely have some big name high school kids that are making these freshman classes just unbelievable. KVA. one of the best linebackers in the nation, 6th-rated linebacker coming in next year. Bryce Young, 12th best defensive end coming in next year. Gerby Lambert, the 7th highest rated offensive tackle coming in next year. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Notre Dame is getting these guys that used to only go to Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State. And they're beating out some of those teams. If you look at these players and you go to one of these websites and you see who all recruited these guys, it's a who's who of the top 10 in college football, and Notre Dame's getting them. Folks, that's Marcus Freeman. That is Chancey Stuckey. That is several of these great recruiters that Notre Dame had. Al Golden on the defensive side of the ball. I thought Al Golden needed to step it up a little bit more this offseason, but he's come on strong as of late. And there were a ton of recruits at that Notre Dame USC game, and Notre Dame impressed. There are at least 2, I believe 3, that have now been crystal balled to Notre Dame just since that USC victory. So playing well and making it look like it's an exciting university or an exciting team to play for, both on the offensive and the defensive sides of the ball, are going to be critical for Notre Dame, which is why, and look, I'm going to give Marcus Freeman a little bit of slack here. I'm going to cut him some slack. Gerard Parker was not his first choice. Obviously, I'm not going to get into it, but we went after a guy. It didn't work out well. Then we tried to deny it was just a mess. But then we decided after Tommy Rees left that we were just going to bump Parker up. Now, I think Parker does an outstanding job with the tight ends. And all you got to do is look at guys like Mitchell Evans, who, except for Brock Bowers, is playing better than any tight end in college football. And then obviously you have Holden Stays and you have Eli Raridan and Cooper Flanagan, who was a freshman this year. I mean, Notre Dame, once again, is just loaded in the tight end room. So I think Parker would be good to demote and not fire. But I think Marcus Freeman needs to find himself a legitimate offensive coordinator. I don't know if it needs to be a former head coach that loses their job, or walking in and poaching somebody from an already good team, but he needs to find that offensive coordinator that kind of gets us out of the Brian Kelly era. I'm still seeing too many plays that are taking way too long to develop. We're not hitting the hole fast enough, and all of those are kind of staples of that Brian Kelly offense that you look at and you're like, okay, it might be Marcus Freeman's defensive side of the ball now and Al Golden's defensive side of the ball, but it still looks like Brian Kelly's offense. And we've got to get out of that. We need a much more exciting offense to bring about change on that side of the ball, because as well as Notre Dame played on defense the other night, you can't win every single game like that. You've got to put up points. And earlier in the year, we were doing that. And then we hit that 4-game stretch of ranked teams. I'm going to say that again. And then we hit that 4-game stretch of ranked teams, all of which had good defenses, except for USC. And we saw what Notre Dame did to USC. But the other victory that we had against Duke, let's face it, if not for the 4th and 16 by Sam Hartman, we don't win that game. And we lost to Ohio State and got crushed by Louisville, both of whom played extremely good defense. And we kind of couldn't get out of our own way in the offensive side of the ball. I like Sam Hartman. I think that Sam Hartman has been a little overvalued. I think I don't want to say overrated. I think Sam Hartman is a very good quarterback, and I think he throws a beautiful deep ball. But Sam Hartman, because he doesn't have quite the mobility that, say, a Caleb Williams does, he doesn't have anywhere near the mobility. Now, he can scramble, and obviously that scramble against Duke was huge, but he's not necessarily known for his athletic ability. He's known more for his in-the-pocket presence. We have lots of young receivers on this team. Tobias Merriweather hasn't broken out of his shell like we had hoped. He's had a couple of nice plays, but, Chris Tyree, I'm pleased with, but this is his first year as a wide receiver. He's playing in the slot. So, he's had some big drops. He had that huge drop against Louisville. I think if he catches that ball against Louisville and Notre Dame scores a touchdown right there at that point in the game, it may turn the game around. But there's a lot of inexperience there. Even the tight ends are young. So, making sure that moving forward as these kids grow together, that we have an offense that is dynamic is going to be something that is going to help us enormously in the recruiting sector. So, what does Notre Dame have next? Notre Dame, over the next 6 weeks, has 2 byes, which, again, boggles my mind. You have no byes weeks 1 through 8, and then the last 4, you have 2 byes. So on October the 28th, we are at home against Pitt. Then the following week, we are at Clemson. That's going to be another one because Clemson's having a down year, but Clemson has a lot of NFL players on that team. So make no mistake, Clemson's going to come to play because although Notre Dame does not have a shot at the national title anymore, they're still a 2-loss team only and looking to go 10-2 and playing a well-publicized bowl game. And obviously for recruiting purposes, beating Clemson would be huge. That means we would have beaten 2 out of the 3 big ones on our schedule this year, Clemson and USC. Lost by 1 second to Ohio State. Louisville just boggles my mind. I think it was just a bad setup all the way around with Notre Dame midterms and being as tired as they were. I don't know what happened that game, but I don't think that's the Notre Dame team that we see. Then after that, you've got another bye. So you have a bye, then you play 2 games, and you have another bye, which is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous that happened. Then we're home against Sam Hartman's old team, Wake Forest. So we'll see how Notre Dame performs against them. And then we finish on the road at Stanford, which the last 4 games, or at least 3 out of the 4, Pitt, Wake Forest, and Stanford, Notre Dame should handle relatively easily. The Clemson one I think is going to be tough, but I think Notre Dame still squeaks out the victory. But Stanford is kind of a funny team. I mean, down 29-0 against Colorado and comes back and wins in what was a double overtime. So again, same with Pitt. Pitt's 1-4. Louisville's undefeated, possibly on the path to maybe their best football season in the modern era, and Pitt upsets them. 1-4 Pitt upsets them. So it will be very interesting to see how these last 4 games play out. I'm looking at not just a potential, but a probable 10-2 record. And then we'll have to see from there. What would I like to see happen by the end of the year, or what would I consider a successful season? Well, I think we can go 10-2, and at that point, I would love to play Brian Kelly and the LSU Tigers. I mean, I think Notre Dame fans, and a lot of people would tune in for that too. It would be a bowl game that would matter. You don't make it into the college football playoff, but Brian Kelly in the SEC going up against his underling Marcus Freeman and the upstart Notre Dame Fighting Irish, that would be a game that a lot of people would tune in for, and I think it would be great entertainment to see that. Now, since neither one of these 2 teams are going to be in the college football playoff, it'll be interesting to see how many players would decide to skip that game. Because as we know last year, both Michael Mayer and Isaiah Foskey, probably our 2 best all-around football players, skipped the game. But the good news is Notre Dame's got so many young players. Now, I mean, yeah, we could lose Joe Alt and someone like that, possibly even Sam Hartman. But I would love to see Steve Angeli get in there. I think Steve Angeli is on deck to be our next starting quarterback, and getting him, some practice in a bowl game would be outstanding. But I am getting ahead of myself. So next week when we get back together, we are going to talk about this upcoming game against Pitt and what that is going to look like as far as game plan goes, both offensive and defensive sides of the ball. We are going to have more information by that point as far as injuries and what Notre Dame is going to try to do moving forward. And like I said, what does a successful season look like at this point? Because we had back-to-back, as big as the heartbreak was against Louisville. That win on Saturday night against USC was pretty damn refreshing to beat a team that has the Heisman Trophy winner on it. So, folks, thank you again for tuning in. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, share it, comment on it. Remember, tune in every week to the Sunship Sports Channel, Blue and Gold till I'm dead and cold, and we will see you next time.